This book is really cool. It's speculation about what will happen once this reality is disclosed to us. It ponders maybe when this might happen, how it might happen, why it might happen, all of that kind of stuff. It's very thorough, and of course, people can speculate all day, and people do all over the internet and everything. However, this in particular is a book written by, Richard Dolan, who has wrote this anthology of the history of UFO research from the 40s. So far, he's got up until the late 70s, and now he's working on from that point till now. But no, it actually goes into the 90s so far. So, and very detailed. If you haven't read those, you've definitely got to get those books, UFOs in the National Security State, because they're so incredibly detailed over everything that's happened in this field. So there's no one more educated to speculate than these two with all of the different things that they've done. So exciting project. We'll talk to Bryce how this came about. He's also doing some other really cool stuff that I want to save as a surprise for when he comes on the air in just a few short moments. A couple of things to note. Of course, I already mentioned the magazine, the latest edition, the 4th edition, is out on the newsstands. If you're a subscriber, you should be getting it. If you haven't gotten it yet, you'll be getting it soon. Sometimes people don't get it for a couple weeks for some reason, but most people get it fairly quick, and they have been sent out like about 2 weeks ago. So you should be getting it very soon if you haven't gotten it yet. Hang tight. And if you haven't gotten it in a week, definitely get a hold of us and say, hey, dudes, where's my magazine? And we'll get you out another one, and make sure you get your magazine. Don't worry, we have very friendly customer service here, and we will do whatever it takes to satisfy the customer. I'm very excited about this magazine because it has a lot of Rendlesham Forest stuff and UFO landings and stuff like that in there, which is cool. And we tackle, which is book tackles, the whole subject of exopolitics. Skylar Alvgren, I think that's how you say her name. I should look at the camera. I'm looking over here. Skylar Alvgren, she is a writer, a freelance journalist who writes about Fortean subjects, including UFOs, and she actually has been to a lot of the X conferences and exopolitics type of stuff, and she noted, as many of us do, this incredible spread of exopolitics all over the world and into other countries, especially in Europe. So she wrote about that in the magazine, which is really exciting because not a lot of people know what exopolitics is, or maybe they've never heard of that term at all. But for those of us who are in this field or who follow this, we definitely know it's something that's very popular and a big movement that's going on worldwide. So she tackles that, and they tackle it in this book because, of course, there's the politics, and in particular, they kind of focus on the politics of how we deal with extraterrestrials. That is exopolitics. UFO Congress, too, we're ramping up for that. We are waiting to hear from some of our top guests. So we have a lot of cool guests on the list. Richard Dolan is one of them, who will be speaking at the UFO Congress this year from February 23rd to the 27th. It's going to be a ton of fun, and it's going to be very informative as well. So for the more serious guys who want to figure this stuff out, and they're not there to mess around, they're there to figure out what's going on, we've got a lot for you as well. For those who like to mix in some fun, we've got some entertainment as well, because we don't want you to stress out, and get all depressed and go home or something. We want you to hang out, and we want to have fun hanging out with some of our listeners and our readers. So UFOcongress.com is where you can go to get that list of speakers. And as I said, we've still got some of our big names not even listed yet. So it's going to be a lot of fun to confirm them and get those up there. UFOcongress.com is also where you can register. I suggest you register early. First, it's cheaper. Second, you can guarantee your room in this lovely hotel that we're going to be in, the Fort McDowell Resort. That's right, a resort. This isn't some Best Western, type of conference deal here where we're taking what they're giving us. No, we're going all out and getting the best for you at the UFO Congress, the 20th anniversary. Very exciting. Very exciting as well are all of the UFO stories in the news. You can read those daily UFO headlines on our front page that we put up all the time. All of the headlines that are getting into the conventional media out there, which happens a lot. And we have our correspondent, Jason McClellan, doing double duty because we're a man down. We had a sick person. And he is in the studio, and he's going to tell us all about the news, right, buddy?
Yes, sir. Greetings, Alejandro, and hello, world. This is your Open Minds News Brief for Monday, October 4th, 2010. London Sunday Times reported that the United Nations has appointed Malaysian astrophysicist Mazlan Othman to serve as Earth's ambassador when extraterrestrials make contact with humans. According to Fox News, the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs is denying Othman's appointment, calling the whole story nonsense. The initial story from Sunday's Times claimed that Othman would describe her new role as Chief Alien Ambassador next week at Royal Society, or this week, at Royal Society Conference in Buckinghamshire, England.
Yes, that conference is going on right now.
It is going on right now, and because of the conflicting statements about what Othman would be speaking about at this conference, there's a lot of attention waiting to hear what she will really say.
Hopefully we'll hear tomorrow, and she may be speaking right now for all we know.
She could be.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to find information about this conference that's going on, but fortunately our colleague Antonio Huneas found the information and we're watching it closely.
Good job, Antonio. He
Yes,
does a great
kudos
work.
to Antonio. In other news, a UFO was reported over Arlington, Texas by residents there last week. Witnesses saw a strange object with blue light zipping across the night sky. Multiple videos of the object were uploaded to YouTube. Arlington Police, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, and the FAA said they didn't receive any UFO reports that night, but someone at the FAA did see one of the videos on YouTube, and he offered his opinion that the object was a remote-controlled airplane with blue LED lights attached to it. Witnesses aren't buying this theory, though.
It could be. I watched the video myself, and it very well could be. It's hard to say. That's one of the things I definitely want to do. I need to buy a remote control airplane anyway, and they have these cool, ducted fan ones. And they really zip around the sky a lot, and it's easy to tape some LEDs on there. And when you watch this thing, he could be right. You can't rule that out in this case because it doesn't do anything. Stays in one general area, flies down into the home. So
you're right. You can't really rule that out. A lot more people are doing. I mean, there's a whole market for that type of thing. This night flying. I mean, people are doing it with kites, with these remote control airplanes. And there are even sites that specialize in selling these LED lights specifically for that purpose, for attaching them to kites or airplanes so you can fly them at night.
Mm-hmm. I've got this little box thing here on my screen. It's weird. Get out of there.
Push it away.
I tried.
No.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, remember you can go to openminds.tv and the radio page and watch us conversing back and forth live. This is fun because Jason isn't sitting next to me right now. He's actually in the running everything, pulling double duty like I mentioned, so you can see us both on the screen there at our website.
It looks like I'm next to you.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool. This is high-tech stuff. Video into radio. The Sky Valley Chronicle, a small news publication in Washington State, published a UFO photo on their website from, let's see, what is it? Sorry, Alejandro, I don't want to look at you anymore.
Okay.
They published a UFO photo on their site. They do this thing where they have photo of the day, and they decided to do a UFO photo. And the photo they posted was from a 1950 newspaper from Redbud, Illinois. According to the report, the UFO was apparently one of many witnessed by several people on April 26, 1950. More than 30 people called the sheriff's office to report objects described as brightly lit objects of spectacular dimensions, which made no sound but cruised above the treetops at speeds of around 100 miles an hour. And one of the witnesses was the county sheriff himself. Witnesses insisted the objects weren't airplanes or helicopters. This is pretty cool. This is a report from back in 1950, and it sounds like a lot of reports that come out now.
I'm glad you chose this one because we hadn't talked about this, but yeah, that was one of the cool ones that came across last week. And you're right, it's incredible because it's from the 50s, and there's so many of these. Just like we've been posting on the website, and we have in the magazine. These older photos from 35 millimeter cameras that are these, astonishing, fairly close objects.
And, again, I mean, we like to sometimes think that mass sightings are this rare thing, but the more you read some of these old reports, there are UFOs seen by hundreds of people, like this one back in 1950.
Yeah, I mean, these mass sightings. And what I think is interesting is the better the sighting, often, not always it's the case, the less you hear from authorities. They just don't say anything.
Right. And it was fun with this report in 1950 that one of the main witnesses was the police officer.
Right.
Off to England, a man in Cumbria, England, noticed he was walking his dog. Well, he was actually playing with his dog while his dog was playing in water, and he pulled out his cell phone to record video of it. And this was back in July. Bob Atkins was playing with his dog, and when he was reviewing the video of the footage later, he noticed a strange object in the footage. It was a solid black object, and it zoomed across the screen and was only visible for about a second. You can't really see much from the UFO, but for a cell phone video, we see these a lot, and with a cell phone video, this is pretty good. And I believe on the, I forget which website posted this, but they have the full video. And, well, not the full video, you don't see the dog playing in the water, but you clearly see it's about a 5-second video. And at the 3-second marker, you see this black mass zoom across the screen. Now, if you pause it, I mean, you could argue that it could be a bird or a fast-moving plane or a bug or something. But they analyzed the video, some analysts, I have no idea how good it was, but determined that it was a solid object. It wasn't like a speck on the lens or anything like that. But they can't rule out a bird or anything. But it looks like a solid object, a black object. But it's kind of cool.
Yeah, and lots of the birds you can see some shape or some fading from movement. But this one does look kind of weird.
Looks a little like a disc, but you can't really make out anything.
Yep.
On to other news. A sighting that's been getting a lot of attention is a UFO from Montreal. A sighting that, Montreal, it happened in Canada last week. Several locals called police early Wednesday. It was in the morning, technically. It was about 12:30 in the morning. And these people saw a strange UFO hovering in the sky. One of the witnesses was a doctor who was driving home from work. He described the object as having sparkly red and blue lights. He also claimed the object morphed from a triangle shape into something that looked more like a trapezoid. The doctor was quoted as saying, "I'm a guy who spends a lot of time in the country in the summer. I've seen satellites, I've seen falling stars, I know what planes look like. None of those things had the trajectory or motion that this did." He was able to capture a picture on his cell phone, but it's completely grainy and you can't really make anything out. And police checked with the airport, but nothing appeared on the radar at the time the mysterious object was in the sky.
Yeah, I thought, well, this one did get a lot of news. It still got news. Even today, there was a story about it where someone said it could possibly be this or that, but we're not sure. But it got so much news, I think, because this doctor who was interviewed was so credible, and he was so genuine when he spoke about it, saying, look, I thought people were crazy who saw UFOs, and you may think I'm nuts now, but this is what I saw, and I'm confident that it was not something conventional. I don't know what it was, but it was really weird, and I think just because of the way he stated it, it came across very credible, and it got a lot of attention.
Right. Again, with the witnesses that are considered more credible, police officers, military officials, doctors. My wife would hate me, but I don't think anyone would say the same for lawyers.
Oh, yeah, that's unfortunate, but...
Well, Alejandro, here's something that I need your help remembering. But this is something that's happened a couple times in the past that we've talked about. Now, students in Sanford, England were surprised to find a crashed UFO at their school last week. The crash wasn't real, though, but rather something staged by the teachers to engage the students with a live situation and to encourage creative writing. Police were even on hand to show the students how to properly investigate the scene. We talked about this, I think it was probably last year, but there was another school that did the same thing. They chose for this creative writing project to do a UFO crash and have the students write about it.
Yep, this is at least the third time that this sort of program has hit the news, the exact same thing. And the first person who did it was just trying to get the kids excited about journalism and investigation and stuff like that. And it's actually not something that new. In fact, when I was a journalism student, I was part of the Rocky Mountain Journalism Association or something like that. In our big conference, they would do that. We would all break into, they would do like this press conference. In this case, I think it was, I remember Reese's monkeys that had some sort of disease that got out. And you would write a story on it, and then everybody would submit their print and their audio stories, and you'd win awards. Of course, I won second place for broadcast reporting on that one. First place was like a year's free school somewhere, which I missed out on. Second place was just a piece of paper. But anyway, so I think these people just decided to take that idea to get students interested and do this UFO crashing. But it's interesting how it's spreading and going all over the world, this concept, and being taken very serious.
I thought it was kind of funny that in the article that the news source that published this, the way they phrased it, they said the police officers were on hand to show the students how to properly investigate a UFO crash.
Right. As if they've done that.
I wonder how many UFO crashes they've investigated.
Yeah. Oh, kids, we do this at least once a month, investigate these crashed UFOs.
Maybe they do.
The last protocol right here is you call the Navy and they come and they pick it up and then you wash your hands of the whole ordeal. So in fact, I wonder if they tell the kids, when you go home tonight, you cannot tell your parents about what happened, the details about what happened today.
You think that'd make it more realistic?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that line too. I noticed that line you're talking about where the police were on hand to show them how to do it. Yeah, as if they do it often.
Alejandro, we have more UFOs in Australia. A tourist accidentally captured a UFO in a picture while photographing Catherine Gorge in Australia's Northern Territory. The tourist didn't realize he had photographed a UFO until he reviewed his photos after concluding his trip. According to the tourist, his photo was taken only hours before hundreds of people in a nearby town witnessed a UFO in the sky. Witnesses to this mass sighting said the object moved slowly across the sky for approximately 5 seconds, then disappeared. After seeing the object in his photo, the tourist thought of his father, who had apparently been a strong UFO believer all his life.
Well, he kind of caught it on camera. I mean, the picture that they show, it's almost like halfway off camera.
Yeah, I wonder if he had any other pictures.
Yeah.
Because, according to this picture, there really isn't much to determine anything.
Yeah, like it could be a tree branch or something.
An overhanging tree. Yeah, exactly.
But what I thought here again, and I think we've been mentioning this a lot lately, Northern Territory News, this Australian newspaper, is really getting into reporting UFO sightings, and here they are again with another one.
Right, yeah, definitely getting into it, and definitely more to report from Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Now to China. China launched their Chang'e 2 unmanned lunar probe on Friday. This is the space program's latest milestone in their push to put a man on the moon in 2017. This latest mission will use the probe to test technology and photograph possible landing sites in preparation for an unmanned lunar landing planned for 2012. The probe is scheduled for a 6-month mission. At the end of the 6 months, the probe will either be sent further into space, move into orbit around Earth, or will land on the moon as a test for the 2012 landing.
Yeah, exciting. I mean, these days with space news, it's always a lot going on, a lot of really cool stuff out there.
Especially with all of these companies in their push to put people into space, you know, even for tourism with the hotel,
Yeah,
space hotels.
right.
There are multiple space hotels in the works, and it's all very exciting.
Yeah, although you scared me for a minute there because the name of that craft is very similar to a bad word in Spanish. So be careful, people, when you're telling your friends about this story.
I won't attempt it again, but I certainly had to look up the pronunciation. So. And I think I was lucky.
I think you did good.
All right.
Well done, buddy.
Now let's go to Russia.
Okay.
A Russian who claimed to have encountered extraterrestrials has been reelected to another 4-year term as president of the World Chess Federation. Kirsan Elyumzhinov, who has held the position since 1995, beat Anatoly Karpov in the presidential election by a vote of 95 to 55. Elyumzhinov was Russia's official candidate, publicly backed by the Kremlin, while Karpov was strongly opposed by Russia, likely due to his criticism of Russian politics. After an ugly campaign of mudslinging and name-calling, Elyumzhinov extended an invitation to Karpov, offering him the vice presidency. However, after accusing Elyumzhinov of incompetence and corruption during the campaign, Karpov might find serving as Elyumzhinov's vice president slightly uncomfortable. Earlier this year, Elyumzhinov publicly claimed to have met with extraterrestrials in Moscow, where he communicated with them and was shown around their spaceship. He has also pushed for the creation of a UFO research center in Russia.
He's like, definitely a new hero of mine, and I think a lot of people feel like that. And I think that's why this story did get a little bit of play, because he's kind of like, it seems like he's being really chastised and attacked because of his extraterrestrial experiences he talks about. But he's so, I don't care. I'm a millionaire and I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. And he seems like, he doesn't seem like a mudslinger. He offered that olive branch to the guy who didn't win. So he's kind of an underdog. He's surprisingly a Buddhist with a Buddhist country in Russia, which is kind of, I didn't even know there was a Buddhist, state in Russia before these stories started getting out. So he's kind of like an underground hero now.
Kalmykia. Kalmykia is so much fun to say.
Yeah, his
so is
name.
Kirsan Elyumzhinov.
Exactly. The names are fun to say. He's just got a good mixture of things there that make him a good kind of our champion in Russia.
Lots and lots of news out of Russia, too. And that'll be great if they get a UFO research center there. Alejandro, that's it for the news. Remember to check out these stories and more at openminds.tv, your source for UFO-related news. I'm your Open Minds news correspondent, Jason McClellan, and you've been briefed.
All right. Thank you, Jason. And I got to say, we had a lot of international news there. And I want to say thank you to all of our international listeners. It always amazes me when we get emails and information from people all over the world who listen to the show. And I want to thank you guys for joining the show. Thank you for emailing. Continue to email us stuff. And if you come across news in your country that we haven't covered, feel free to fill us in on that. That'd be great, because we read all the emails, Jason and I, and we try to include some of that stuff. And we've gotten some emails from international people that we've included in the magazine and that we've included on the website as well, and we'll continue to do that. So I really appreciate, and it's just terribly exciting. That's what's so cool about the internet, is that we can have this international community, and I feel honored in being able to bring this news and information to you guys all over the world. So moving on, Jason did mention some of the other stories that we have on the web, that we always have some cool stuff going on there. And I wanted just to mention a couple of those. We have, again, from the 90s, a photograph from Mexico, Monte Morelos, Mexico in particular. This is from the mid-90s, and just a kind of astonishing photograph, actually. So go check that out. It's certainly something that is different than... it's like a disc, but it's kind of different than most discs with these little pods on the bottom of it. Also, another great story by Michael Schratt, our aerospace historian. And this is about, it's called UFO, Flying Saucers for Real, actually just Flying Saucers for Real. And this is a story about a gentleman who saw, some flying saucers being scrapped. And what this was is these saucer-shaped planes with U.S. Air Force emblems on them of various sizes, some of them really big. They had your traditional landing gear with wheels that they would roll around on and cockpits, but they were circular and they're top secret. And these ones were being scrapped, and it looked like they were really old, according to this guy who was in the Air Force. So you got to read this story. When they asked, why isn't the public notified about this if they've been around for so long? They just said, I don't think he really had an answer, if I remember correctly from the story. But he said these were being scrapped because the newer models of these things are even better. And these are just total circular discs. So very interesting. You're going to want to check out this story. And as usual, Michael, since it's kind of his forte, creates these really cool images and graphics, really showing you the details of these crafts. So go check that out on the website. Remember, openminds.tv. You'll see that right there in the featured section. Also, a lot of people talking about the event, and we've updated the review by our television producer, Tom Ruffin, and he's reviewed the first 2 episodes now. I'm sure he's going to watch the third and give us another review, and you can go in there, see what he thought, and let us know if you agree or not with what he said in our comment section. However, speaking of TV, one of my favorite TV producers is Bryce Zabel, and I believe we have him on the line right now. Are you there, Bryce?
I'm here, and thanks for having me, Alejandro. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show again. It's always a pleasure to hang out and talk with you and to have you on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. There's so much to talk about these days.
I know, and you're doing a lot of cool stuff. And one of the things I didn't tell the listeners about, which is something that is super cool that I want to start off with, is that you optioned Witness to Roswell and Top Secret Magic, the first written by Don Schmidt, the second by Stanton Friedman, all kind of about Roswell and Majestic 12. And you've got their life stories, and you're working on a project called Magic Men, right?
You bet. MAJIC, Magic Men.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're trying to do what will actually be sort of the story behind the story of Roswell.
Cool.
JFK meets all the president's men, if you will, from a tone point of view. It just seemed to me that it is just as dramatic how they had to do this investigation to bring the whole Roswell story to the forefront. And by the way, it's not just Stanton and Don. Many, many people have participated in researching Roswell, but those 2 men in particular bumped heads and crossed paths quite a bit in the early 90s when things were really getting sorted out. But it's a fascinating and exciting project because we want to be able to tell people not just only what happened at Roswell and what the state of the state is there, but also the drama behind the scenes of what it took to get the story out.
I think that's an incredible story because it is an amazing story. One of the things that blows my mind in this field is that Roswell almost was swept under the rug, and we almost never heard about it if it wasn't this chance meeting of Friedman with Marcel Sr., who found the craft.
And that happened in 1978, so you're totally right. If you think about it, 31 years elapsed where basically people pushed it under the rug and said either they're going to keep the secret for whatever reasons, or that they never heard about it. It was very much like 1984, where the official denial. These days we have the internet and so forth, but the fact that it appeared in a few newspapers and on a few radio broadcasts, it kind of just disappeared, poof, into the air, and away it went. And you're right. If Stanton Friedman had not actually heard about Jesse Marcel and made the trip while he was down in Louisiana to go visit with him and heard his story, I'm not sure exactly what path would have happened that would have taken us to where we are today.
Yeah, another exciting aspect of this story is what you just mentioned, too, is that these are 2 different researchers. just focusing on Schmidt and Friedman, who are
You bet.
very serious about finding the truth. Schmidt had been, with CUFOS, a very important UFO research organization, and how they're very serious about looking for the truth, and how people working for the same goal, kind of like these mystery cop shows where they're trying to figure out who the murderer is, and they butt heads because they have different theories and different evidence, and that whole way that plays out is really interesting also.
Well, one of the things that we hope to do with this film project is to transcend being just a UFO or an alien movie and to be a crossover film where people who really don't know much about the topic can still find it to be very character-driven. So from our point of view, we want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the human drama here. Not only is it about the greatest story never told, but it's also about these two men and the competition and the personal sacrifice it took both of them in order to accomplish this goal, and how they pushed each other and how they conflicted, and how and if you know anything about the history of these two men, they each worked with partners that turned out to be quite troublesome for both of them, and they suffered their own slings and arrows, so it turned into a pretty fascinating story.
You're right, because a lot of people don't know, and I don't know if we really have time to get into all the drama there.
Sure.
But you're right. They had these colleagues that turned out all this crazy mystery going on here, even some evidence of Air Force disinformation going on in there. In this incredible story, and I think that's a perfect perspective that hopefully, like you said, draws in a larger audience, is that it's a human drama, even if you just set aside whether or not you believe in what they were searching for.
I think that's really true. In fact, I think our log line, in Hollywood, a log line is your high concept. It's how you boil it down to the TV guideline, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
For us, Magic Men is about two down-to-earth guys chasing a story that is out of this world. So that kind of puts it in perspective. The story is as big can be. The confirmation that we are not alone, and more than that, not only are we not alone, but they're not some cosmic pen pals out there that we're going to communicate with by SETI telescopes, but that they're actually here now, or at least were at that time. And yet at the same time, it's an extremely human drama. If you think about it, it's not like these guys made a lot of money by coming down to Roswell so many times and investigating it. And so they each suffered personal consequences. Don Schmidt went through several broken engagements during this time, mostly because people said he was spending too much time running off to Roswell.
That's one of the ridiculous arguments about Roswell, is that it's self-perpetuating because all of these people are making a lot of money, which
That's
certainly
just not true.
Yeah, it's not the case. These two people would be the two people that probably are making the most money off of Roswell, and that's not very much.
No, it's not. We hear that all the time, and I think it's time for the UFO community to stop cannibalizing its own with that. If somebody writes a book and sells a couple of books or whatever, they're doing. I mean, come on. Everybody deserves the right in this country to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, to my knowledge, has really gotten rich off UFOs other than possibly Steven Spielberg and a few other people. I think that it's just wrong. We want to encourage researchers to be able to do good research. So to carp on people because of that kind of comment, I just think it's just not. It's counterproductive. It's not useful.
Well, it's not useful, and what's funny, it's weird because it's such a dichotomy, because this is the United States, and we measure success by dollars.
Right.
And so, like, if you have a doctor who's rich, because they're good at what they do, that's an indication that, wow, this person is really talented and good at what they do, so they're an authority. But it doesn't work in this field. If they make a lot of money, then that's bad.
Well,
somehow.
we do have some straightening out to do. Listen, there are people who probably are not sincere, who have tried to make money off the topic, but we know who the sincere people are, and I would say both Stanton Friedman and Don Schmidt and other researchers who participated in breaking the Roswell story, from my experience and from my understanding, are honorable and hardworking guys who, if anything, I prefer to think of them as American heroes. These are people who hate being lied to, and will pay almost any price and bear almost any burden to get at the truth. What could be more American than that? What could be more honorable?
And they're both very articulate and great presenters. They're careful in their research. If Stanton Friedman has researched something, you know that he has picked it apart by the smallest of details.
But it doesn't mean that people always agree with him, and it doesn't mean that UFO researchers don't disagree and argue vehemently. And it also doesn't mean that Stanton Friedman is going to be a bland character. He's about as interesting a guy as you could imagine, and I look forward to finishing the screenplay with him as a character. I look forward to bringing some great actor to that role and seeing what they do with it. And the same with Don Schmidt. They couldn't be more different in terms of personality. And that's, from a human drama point of view, what will be so fascinating about telling their story.
Yeah. You can actually, the listeners will actually be able to watch this human drama play out on the stage at the UFO Congress in February, because both of those people are going to be there.
Well, it's interesting. They have, over the years, because of UFO conferences, etc., ended up seeing each other a lot, and they have a lot of respect for each other now. But there was a time, and we will explore that in the film, where their partners hated the other guy, where they differed very strongly with each other, where they argued incredibly over some of the facts of the Roswell case and how best to present those facts to the public. So there's a whole a film obviously works best with conflict. Well, there's the conflict on the macro level of people who would like to keep the facts to themselves, and then the researchers who want to get at the facts. But there's also the conflict between the researchers themselves, because we're only human, folks. We still have all those foibles and weaknesses, and we'll be representing some of those in the film as well.
Right. And I think people, especially in the field and people who watch this kind of thing, got to realize that that's not abnormal. If you go to, I remember one scientist, he was a geologist, came to one of the MUFON conferences, and, you know, people were like, wow, there's a big debate about what you had to say with another researcher. And he's like, are you kidding? That's nothing. At these geology conferences, we're totally at each other's throats, and everybody's fighting over, you know, does this rock mean this, or does that rock from this era? So it's not unusual that people just have passionate feelings about their findings.
And by the way, that's how the truth is tested.
Right.
I do think, look, I'm in favor of passionate debate. I think that it's a good thing for not only ufology, but it's a good thing for darn near any endeavor that you choose to get into. The only caveat is that sometimes in this field, people get a little personal and angry and character assassination rather than civility. I'm in favor of civility. I think you can disagree with the person and take an entirely different point of view with them and still maintain a friendly and cordial and collegial debate. And I think we need to practice that more, especially if we're going to take this important topic to the people who don't know as much as we do.
Right.
And try to win them over and increase their consciousness.
Right. I mean, you know, Friedman debates a lot with Seth Shostak of SETI.
Sure.
And they're very similar in their presentations, I find, because they're both very witty, very articulate. They're people who get you really drawn into what they're talking about. And but with Shostak, I asked him, you know, well, has anybody brought evidence to you to look at, and what did you think of that? And he said, no. He's like, people in ufology don't talk to me. And I think you're right. Being more civil and working together is what's going to open up some of these other people to hopefully start to look at this evidence.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Recently, Evan Davis of the BBC had done kind of a mock investigation of the Rendlesham Forest incident, and a debunker, Mark Pilkington, who has written a book called, I can't remember what his book is, but I had sort of called him out because he was one of the debunkers with him, and then he had written me back, and we started writing back and forth to each other, and we have a very cordial, friendly relationship. he sent me a copy of his book, which I have, and I'm sending him a copy of our book when it comes out. And I think that's the way it should be. We need to talk to other people and practice our discussions with people who don't necessarily believe as we do, because it does us no good just to talk to each other about the things that we already sort of take as articles of faith. In order for disclosure of any kind to happen in the future, we're going to have to take that battle to people who do not comprehend things the way we think they should.
Right. And that's really cool to hear, and I want to hear more about this, actually, that you created a dialogue with this guy, because I didn't know that. I did read what you had written about his article, and I agreed wholeheartedly, because he started off with, I don't believe in ETs and UFOs, and there's no evidence you could ever show me that would make me believe.
But I should just point out, that was Evan Davis that said that.
Oh, okay.
Mark Pilkington was the debunker that he took with him on that one-night investigation. Evan Davis literally set a new standard for closed-mindedness, and I just thought, if there was a poster child for the abuse of the media on this topic of UFOs and some of these events, Evan Davis is the poster child, because here is a guy that not only doesn't get it, but is proud to not get it, condescending and arrogant in abundance, in such abundance I've almost never seen it before. It was amazing.
Well, and yeah, and I mean, that's just, you would get an F in journalism school if you start off a story like that, you know? And
you just can't.
So how did your conversation with the debunker go? I mean, was he open to...
Well, he's in England, so our conversation has all been by email. But I have to say, we just kind of, he wrote to sort of correct me on one fact, and then I wrote him back because he had misunderstood what I was writing about. But we started treating each other very cordially in our emails, instead of hostile name calling. And I think both of us at the end were feeling like, well, this is the way it's supposed to be. You don't have to agree with somebody. If you invite someone to your home to have dinner around the table, and they disagree with you about politics or religion or UFOs, are you supposed to all have a terrible time that night? Yeah, no, you ought to be able to talk to each other.
I know there's that rule of thumb, which unfortunately holds true, that you should stay away from talking about religion and politics, and it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to talk about these things we're passionate about in a civil way, to just respect each other's opinions and to learn.
It's so true, and maybe we're making some progress in that regard. I by the way, I found the Evan Davis quote. If you'll just go, let me just read it. I think your listeners would enjoy it. He started his article in the BBC, which is revered for its journalism, and this is a direct quote of the beginning of his article. Let me be completely honest. I do not believe in alien UFOs. Nothing could persuade me that extraterrestrials are hovering above us or getting ready to drop in for tea. It is an issue, in fact, on which I am uncharacteristically closed-minded. There is no evidence you could cite that would make me change my mind. I would always regard it as far more likely that the evidence was planted by Earthlings trying to convince us of UFOs rather than by Martians themselves.
Yeah.
Now, condescending, arrogant, wrong, and just simply goofy.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what passed for journalism on the BBC.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't write about dark matter and started off, I gotta say, I don't believe in dark matter. There's no evidence any scientist can ever show me that dark matter is real. I mean, he would no longer be on the science beat.
Alejandro, you and I both know that the media has punted badly on this whole issue, particularly the establishment media. The more establishment the media is, the less likely they are to allow themselves to treat this kind of field of investigation as credible. And sometimes they just stub their toe so badly they're just an embarrassment to journalism and to themselves.
Right. Well, moving on, I want to also talk about some other cool news that you have, and that's about dark skies, because we talked about this when you were on a year ago, how I had such a hard time finding some of those videos to watch, and they weren't on DVD yet, and you explained that, but you have an update.
I do. I have very good news for all of you people who have been frustrated for 14 years now that the only way to get it is to get it illegally or to try to get a bad copy of a DVD or to have yourself ripped off by someone who says he's going to sell you a DVD set and then doesn't. It's finally happening. Shout Factory here in Los Angeles, which is a major DVD distributor, will be putting Dark Skies out on DVD the entire 20 hours with oodles of goodies that they've been working on, and I've been consulting with them to make sure they're of very high quality. And it will come out officially on January 18th, 2011, which we actually picked that date. I helped them pick that date because that coincides with the 50th anniversary of John Kennedy's inaugural. And as you'll recall from Dark Skies, our pilot is all about our main character, John Loengard, going to Washington, D.C. to be part of President Kennedy's New Frontier. So the news is good, and thank you for bringing that up. I've had so many people, thousands of people over the years say, why don't you put this out on DVD? And would that I had that ability, but I did not. And finally, the issues are resolved, and it's coming out.
When is it going to be out again?
January 18th, 2011. Awesome. So just a few months from now.
Oh, that's great to know. And is it going to be on Blu-ray?
It's not Blu-ray.
Okay.
It's DVD.
Okay.
It wasn't shot in a way that needs Blu-ray, actually.
Okay.
But they've put together, it's a very, very clean copy. There's audio commentaries from the cast and the producers on up to 5 hours of it. They've shot a behind-the-scenes documentary. We found all the extras, including the promos from NBC and some of the Sony materials and some interviews from the time and artwork and photos. So yeah, they've really done a tremendous job, and I'm just thrilled that they've stepped up so directly to say there's enough fans of this show that we want to give them something that maintains the integrity of the series. And frankly, I had to watch all the episodes. Not had to. I was pleased to watch all the episodes again because I hadn't seen them. They were on VHSs in my closet. And so in order to prepare for the audio commentaries, I had to review them all. And what I really think is what's going to make people feel good about it is when it was on NBC, it constantly was being preempted. It was on Saturday night. There were no DVRs. I don't know anybody in the world that tries to stay home on Saturday night. Most people try to go out and do something. So what happened is nobody saw the series, in a march through the episodes the way they were intended to be seen.
Yeah.
And now finally, after all these years, people will be able to put in the first episode, watch it, and if they want to watch the next one that night, they can do that, and they can watch them all in a row. And when I did it recently, the funny thing is when you're producing something, your head is so much in the bubble of just meeting your deadlines. You almost can't even pause to appreciate what you're doing. You just have to move on to the next thing so quickly. For me, it was just a joy to see, honestly, how much integrity was in the production values of it. I think people will look at it and say it's got the production value of Mad Men and the look and feel of Mad Men, only it's got aliens in it. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think, for those who haven't seen it or maybe just slightly recall it, I think what they're going to be excited about, too, is it reminds me a bit of Paul David's Roswell movie, where it really kind of holds up over the time, where a lot of those concepts that you had in Dark Skies with, like you just mentioned, the Kennedys getting involved with UFOs and with Majestic 12 and these other concepts that still hold up in UFO research or mythology or whatever you want to call that, but you're portraying it there on the screen in a way that it's never been done before and still hasn't.
It holds together for two reasons, Alejandro. The first is that because it was shot as a period piece, it never really dates. And a lot of times, like if you watch a Starsky and Hutch from, shot in the 70s, it looks like a 70s TV show. But if we were to make a show that took place in the 70s now, it would have a more authentic quality because we would have that perspective, and that's partly what you're seeing in the Dark Skies quality when you watch it. And you're right. The one thing that we tried to do was to weave in not just events from the 60s and personalities from the 60s, and we did have everybody in it, from Timothy Leary to Colin Powell to Jim Morrison and the Beatles and Howard Hughes, but we also had the ufology touchstones like the Socorro Landing and Betty and Barney Hill and the New York Tower blackout and things that sort of had a UFO connection, and we tried to weave them all together, and it's really a fun ride. That much I'll tell you. Anybody that watches it, I think is going to have a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a lot of fun, and and it plays into, I guess, what we're going to get into next, which
Sure.
is your new project, AD, because there, entertainment is kind of speculation about, what might have happened and
Sure.
putting it together and displaying that on TV. And this book that you are creating with Richard Dolan is kind of the same thing, putting together what might the world after disclosure look like, what could happen, what will happen, and why will it happen, and so many different things that you guys tackle with this book. I guess the first question is, how did it come about?
Well, it came about because a little over a year ago, no, about a year ago, less than a year ago, like 11 months ago, I had finished reading Richard Dolan's second book, UFOs and the National Security State. And as anyone who's read either or both of those books knows, they're brilliant. They're masterpieces of UFO history, brilliantly written and woven together. And I was very taken by them. And I called up Richard, and I didn't know him, and he didn't know me. And I just said, "Has anyone optioned these books for television or film?" And he said, "No." I said, "I'd like to do that." So we worked out an option on his two books, which is almost a separate issue. But as we got to know each other, we met actually at the UFO conference, which now Open Minds will be running from now on. I forget what it's called.
UFO Congress?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We met at last year's, and now you'll have this year's in February. So I guess it was about it was last February where we actually met for the first time. And we got to talking, and I really like Richard, and we kind of hit it off. And I said, "There's an idea that I've been thinking about for quite some time, and I'm kind of intrigued by this, and I'd like to share it with you." And we started talking about AD after disclosure, and you have to admit, it is kind of crazy. Here's Richard Dolan that's written 2 parts of a 3-part series, and he puts part 3 aside long enough to write AD after disclosure with me, because we both said, this is an important book that speaks to the issues of the future. And he's written 2 books that look toward the past of the whole issue. This one is squarely planted in the future. It's all about what will probably happen after disclosure finally comes in one form or another. And that's how it came about, that we both were so taken by the need for this project and the idea for it, that we came together, and I put aside a couple of things I was working on, and he put aside what he was working on, and we came together and gave it our all, and it's happened very, very fast, but it's very, very good. So I'm pleased at the association, and I think we've done exactly what we had set out to do.
Yeah, you're right that, it was a little crazy. I mean, at MUFON, everybody was kind of shocked, that wow, he's going to postpone the 3rd volume, which everybody is, dying to get,
Right.
and fearful that it's going to be a couple years till we get it, because,
Sure.
It already takes him a bit of time to research and get those together. But he's postponing it. But at the same time, he says, don't worry, because AD is going to be out in October, which is like, holy cow. Like you said, you guys are moving quick.
Well, here's the thing. Richard, I think, enjoyed the idea that his other books took such a long time to write because they're such heavy research projects. And what we did on this one is we built on a lot of things that he knew from his research and things that I've thought about. And we both had this book in our heart and soul for a long time anyway. And it was a matter of just getting it on paper. I think the one value that I brought to the party here is when you produce television series, it's all about hitting deadlines. It's about setting a deadline and hitting a deadline and moving the ball down the field as methodically as you can. And so we brought that kind of integrity of the process, if you will, alive. And it paid off handsomely for us because we did it almost exact. We're about a month behind what we had hoped to do, but
Wow.
a month off isn't bad when
Not at all.
you're in the publishing world.
Mm-hmm. So, what part of this month will it be out? Mid or late?
We believe that the books are being delivered so that they will start shipping on October 25th, which is a Monday.
Cool.
We're taking pre-orders right now. It's at afterdisclosure.com, and you can certainly pre-order it. And if you do, then it goes out the first day that we've got them.
Very cool.
And October 25th is what the date looks like. The education I went through on this thing is just what's involved in actually getting a book through the various stages before you can sign off on it and get it printed. But the thing is, if you're doing something of this level, you want to do it right. You want to make sure that it's as perfect as you can get it in the time that is available to you. So in a couple of times, we just stopped down and said, well, there's a problem we've got to fix here, and we fixed it. But I was just reviewing it before coming on with you tonight, and I'm pretty happy with the way it's turned out. I think Rich is too.
Yeah, it's exciting, and I'm glad to hear about the date because I know he's speaking at the Bay Area UFO Expo on the Halloween weekend, and we're going to be there too. Open
great.
Minds, we're going to have a table there. Hopefully you'll be there too, and hopefully I'll be able to get a copy of the book. It means I'm going to have to bring some extra money to get a few copies of his book and Leslie Kean's book because she's going to be there, and I want some signed books.
Well, you're going to get a book, my friend, but and you'll get one signed by Dolan and myself. But
perfect.
I'm thrilled about that too. That is actually perfect timing. There will be books for sale at that event and any event Richard does after the 25th. But the main thing, the biggest struggle was just get them printed, get them where we can get them sent out, and that starts the 25th. So that's from where we sit right now. I count 3 weeks, so we're getting there.
Well, and like you said, I was able to read the early book, and I wrote a review that I just finished because we're wrapping up our 5th issue, so we can send that to the printer and get that out. And in the book I put of Dolan's work is that it's brutally historically accurate. And I think people who have read his books understand what I mean because it's no holds barred. He's very good at being objective and being unbiased and not holding any punches so that people get a full idea of what's happened in UFO research. And I think that's what makes it great with you guys working together because, you really have people that have a really full picture of what's going on to start to speculate about how disclosure might happen. And
we pushed ourselves in I pushed him in certain areas and he pushed me in certain areas. And we rewrote ourselves enough times that as we read through the book, even though there may be a section here or there that one guy did more than the other, overall the voice is a pretty good blend, and it's the kind of book, I think you've just hit the nail on the head. It's the kind of book that Richard and I both have spent a career getting ready to write, and the fact that we were able to write it together for me was a blessing because he certainly has exactly what you talk about. One of the things Richard Dolan is phenomenally talented at doing is taking massive amounts of information from conflicting sources and trying to reconcile them. Mm-hmm. And when he feels the evidence is sufficient to pound the gavel, if you will, and declare one way or another, he'll do it. But when the evidence is not sufficient, he will not. He will simply say, this is what the situation looks like. What the truth is, we do not yet know.
Mm-hmm. And we try to do that here where even if we pound the gavel, as you put it, at least you're still presenting the other side.
I think, by the way, if I can just digress and tell you how much I enjoy Open Minds, not only the magazine but everything else you seem to be doing, your presentation is of an extremely high quality, which I think is important in today's environment. But the depth of the articles, each one is a keeper. It's the kind of thing where you read anything that's a cover article or even the secondary or tertiary articles within a magazine, and you feel like, well, that one's not getting tossed out in the garbage. That one's going in a pile where I can refer to it later because it's full of not only the right facts but some analysis of them. I think it's great.
Well,
really hats off to you guys.
Thank you. It's a great honor to get that sort of response. Thank you very, very much. And, well, to move on, I guess, to AD and the details, let's set the mood by playing a little bit of this UFO disclosure song that you had produced.
Oh, okay, great.
So if Jason can cue the disclosure song.
Should I set it up? Do we just go into it?
Here it goes. It's starting.
Okay, great.
Then we'll talk about it.
I'm ready to be told, time for secrets to unfold. It's our time to come of age, time for truth to turn the page. Don't wanna be inside the dark, live within a question mark. Are they a friend or foe? Tell me now. We need to know. Need to know. Ready to believe. We need to know. Need to know. Ready to believe. You say we must wait our turn. You say too much to learn. You say cover up is fine. That's your plan, not mine. I'm ready to be told. Time for secrets to unfold. It's our time to come of age. Time for truth to turn the page. Don't wanna be inside the dark, live within a question mark. Are they a friend or foe? Tell me now. We need to know. Need to know.
All right. It's a great song. You know, when you sent it to me at first and you said you had the UFO disclosure song,
Right.
I was a little worried because I don't know if you saw this Jeff Peckman rap that they did for the disclosure thing he's doing, but he's kind of doing this rap and you know, maybe if you're into rap and stuff, it was good, but I was a little, you know. But you sent me
Well-
this, and it's well produced, and it's a great song. It's a real great singing. I love her voice.
It's the artist's name is Cherish Alexander, and I had worked with Cherish back when I executive produced the Crow Stairway to Heaven television series.
Right.
And she's a professional, working, very talented Los Angeles musician, and the some of the backing compositions are done by Damian Alexander, who's a great studio guy. And I just felt that the one thing that, as we become a political movement advocating for disclosure, and we're thinking about it, the power of music cannot be diminished. That to bring people together, to focus their minds on the need for change. It may not be everybody's cup of tea. I happen to love it a lot. You can get it on iTunes by looking up Cherish Alexander, but I think that what it does is it raises the feeling of longing that we all have to bring an end to the phase that we're in currently and accept the responsibility for moving forward into the phase that will come next, whatever it is. So it's time to turn the page, as the song says, and I think we're ready to do that.
Did she decide to do that on her own, or did you commission that, or was it kind of a joint thing?
I went to Cherish and said, I want to, you're the perfect person to do it. I want to produce a song that is dedicated to the cause of UFO disclosure, and I don't know how you feel on this topic, Cherish, but would you consider doing it? And she said, not only would we enjoyed working very much together, and so there's that bond, but basically she also said, I'm in favor of this movement, and I believe in this, and I would be thrilled to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody kind of came together to make it all happen. It's one of those happy circumstances, and I think it does capture the emotional situation. Her voice is so powerful.
Right.
I know you only had a chance to play a part of it, but in the full thing, you notice it just builds to the end where you are just saying, yes, let's get on with this. And I think that's the emotion that I've been feeling for years now, and I'm sure many people in your audience probably share that feeling, that we have spent enough time in the shadows here,
Right.
and we got to walk in the light.
Right, but one thing, yeah, a lot of people, like you've said, have this emotion that's building. But one of the big things, and a word that I used a lot, which you just used, is responsibility, because it's not, and that's what I appreciate about Dolan's work and the whole idea of this book is it's responsibly moving into this scenario of after disclosure by thinking about not just demanding disclosure from people who might not even know that there's anything
Right.
going on, but it's thinking about the different aspects, such as who knows and who doesn't, thinking about all of the different implications to, like you say, it's a people's guide to disclosure, to prepare people for what might happen, and also to get us as ufologists or activists to start thinking about, I think, smarter and better ways we can do what we're doing by thinking of these different aspects.
Yeah, you hit on it. The subtitle to our book, the title is AD, After Disclosure, as a reference to how the calendar will be phrased after this. But the subtitle is The People's Guide to Life After Contact. We've written it we've written it to be a crossover book. We hope that the people who are your fans of Open Minds and the people who are involved and in the know in ufology will like it and embrace it and make it theirs. But we also want to reach across the aisle to the people who aren't quite up to speed on this topic and give them a little information and then cause them to start thinking about what the world may look like. One of the things, Alejandro, that I think you pointed out that is different about this book, all of us and probably most of your listeners have our collection of UFO books. I've got, my 100 sitting here, and Dolan's probably got 1,000, and I've seen how many you guys have at Open Minds. The thing is, in most of these books, the debate in the book seems to be about proving that UFOs are real to a non-believer in a way. In other words, it's about stating the facts in a way that these people who don't understand or don't yet get it will get it. But what Richard and I set out to do is to say, we're writing a book for the idea that we're not going to spend our time trying to prove that UFOs are real. We'll give people a little background, but mostly we want to take what might be 2 or 3 paragraphs at most in another book, sort of a future-looking kind of thing about what disclosure might mean, and we want to make that the book. So we've taken what might be a little bit of dessert in another book, and we've made it the entire meal of this book. And we think, and I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that this book has not been written before. So we hope that it will not be the only one of its kind, that it will start a dialogue and a debate that will go forward into the future. But we just felt like it was time for, whether we're right or wrong, whether you agree with us or disagree with us, let the debate begin now. Let's start talking about how the future is going to be organized, because if we do, it won't be quite as surprising and probably not as unpleasant in the transition if we can start to get a handle on it.
Right. And I hope you're right, because it does move this whole disclosure movement to the next level of thinking about the different implications that could be going on. There are some people who, there's many people, of course, that already have predetermined ideas, but
Sure.
You're tackling a lot of these and the pros and the cons. For instance, there's been a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll ask you. One
Sure.
of them was more of a comment where someone says, well, they'll never admit lying to us. And you guys sort of tackle this concept as well.
Well, you have to. No one wants to admit lying. From your son who gets caught doing something wrong, he doesn't want to admit he lies, and neither does the federal government or anyone else. So they're not going to do it because we personally don't think there's any grave evidence for slow acclimation and preparation for disclosure. We believe, as we say in the book, that disclosure is impossible and inevitable, which It's the irresistible force and the immovable object. At some point, something, some trigger event is going to start an avalanche of change that will be impossible to resist. And so the truth of the matter is, yes, nobody wants to admit we got this wrong and that we kept this secret. But at some point, when everybody seems to be figuring it out, your choice, if you're one of those secret keepers, will be to either continue trying to hold on to the secret when everyone now knows you're lying, which is not good in the world spin zone. The one thing you'll want to do then is try to get ahead of the story and manage the story, and that's when disclosure happens. Mm-hmm. We're not saying it's sort of like if you remember the Dr. Strangelove, I believe it's General Buck Turgison or whatever his name is.
One of my favorite movies.
Right, and he's talking about nuclear war, and he says, I ain't saying we're not going to get our hair mussed.
Right.
There's going to be some disruption, of course, and no one's going to disclose without the need to do it. But we believe that there are certain things that are moving toward the inevitability of disclosure. It's not so much a matter of if. I mean, at some point, disclosure will happen. It's more a matter of when. And people, honest people, as we talked about earlier in the show, good people can disagree about when those things will come into alignment to create the right conditions for disclosure. But I think all of us know that eventually disclosure of some kind is going to happen. Mm-hmm. May not be in our lifetimes, that's true, but I'm beginning to think it will be.
Right, and I mean, that's another thing you guys tackle, I mean, is that you're not just outlining your scenario and this is how we think it'll work out. You're kind of, you're examining all of the different ways it might happen, too. Like you just said, it might not happen tomorrow. It might happen in a few years. It might happen not in our lifetime. But in other words, there's also the span of when it might happen. And one of the interesting things you guys tackle in this arena is kind of how it relates to artificial intelligence. And I thought, and that's a new conversation in this field, I think.
Well, I think that what we're trying to suggest is that you have to, there are lots of ways that disclosure can happen. As you point out, we do get into many of them. But on the level of artificial intelligence, et cetera, we are rapidly reaching a place where humanity's no slouch. We are developing new ways of perceiving our world and so forth that make it almost inevitable that if there is an extraterrestrial or some other kind of intelligence, we do not believe the extraterrestrial hypothesis is the only one. There could be others. There could be multiple visitors. But what we are saying is that at some point our abilities to perceive the world around us and the sheer numbers of us and the level of technology that we use to perceive our world will catch up with our ability to confirm that they're here, whether they want us to know or not, whether our government wants us to know or not. We're just going to know.
Uh-huh.
I presume that's what you're talking about, that aspect of the book?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And another aspect which someone has brought up and which kind of made me think, I mean, one of the things I wrote in the review is, I think about disclosure a lot. And I think about the different aspects. And I thought I had thought a lot about disclosure, but that's what's great about this book because it covers so much more. And I think of some of the things I didn't think of. I mean, I had thought about religion and disclosure, but one of the things that got into it, which you see now, like you outline the aliens and the Scientologists, these new religions that have popped up kind of around this, and how I think we'll definitely see an escalation, if not an evolution of religion into moving into this sort of adapting to this new reality.
Well, one of the revelations that we came to in doing our research is that people tend, when they think about this and they think about religion, they say, well, the reason you'll never have disclosure is, it'll just topple religion, etc. We're not so sure. obviously it's going to have an impact, and different religions will be impacted differently, and we go into all those details. But the truth of the matter is they actually did a study not too long ago where they interviewed various people from different religions about disclosure, and what they found out is that most of the people in large numbers who were interviewed did not think that the revelation of an extraterrestrial presence would rock their world. The people who thought that religion's world would be rocked by that revelation were people who were agnostic and atheist.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes that's the thing about facts. They're stubborn things. Sometimes the facts are not what you commonly assume them to be.
Right.
The whole religious issue is fascinating, and it probably exceeds our pay grade to get into it right now. But there are certain trends that are going on. Open Minds wrote about it recently with your article about the Vatican
Right.
and disclosure. Clearly, there is a movement in the Catholic Church to at least open that door a little wider than it's ever been opened. Some religions have no problem at all with the concept of extraterrestrial intelligence, the Mormons, for example. It's going to be a fascinating thing, but one thing that we do say is that it's quite likely that there's going to be a religion or religions yet to be named
Right.
in a post-disclosure world that we don't even know what they are right now, but they'll be showing up in the aftermath. In the same way that probably there'll be political parties that you aren't aware of right now who will show themselves after disclosure.
It's funny you say that because my point on bringing up this subject is religion/political parties, which is the next thing I was going to bring up.
Well, it's interesting. You cannot have disclosure is on one level the most fascinating, powerful, transformative, and revolutionary thing that could ever happen. Okay, so we can all agree with that. We also know that politics, even at its most venal, is still something that tries to be responsive, at least if it's a political thing that based on any kind of voting or whatever, tries to be responsive, and therefore is bound to be impacted on a really grand scale by disclosure. And in the same way that existing religions will probably be changed and morph and adapt to disclosure, certain existing parties will also try to morph and adapt and integrate disclosure concepts into them. There may be new parties formed as well, and in the same way that the Republicans are trying to, for example, absorb the Tea Party advocates into their party, you may find in a post-disclosure world a Democratic Party trying to absorb certain interest groups that view disclosure in a certain way. The one thing that both Rich and I are quite clear on and sure of is that disclosure will also change how we change our politics.
Right. And that's I think you brought up a couple things there that are really important. That a big one being the adaptability, because like you said, it's an atheist who thinks that the religions can adapt. And it's funny because, you mentioned our story about the Vatican, and it makes the point you just made, because it starts off talking about people like Dr. Paul Davies, who's an astrobiologist, and he's the one who made the big point about especially Christian religions and the Catholics not being ready for this, not being able to conceive and adapt to this. And then here they are in response saying, well, that's not true at all. There are space brothers, and we can accept and adapt, and we're going to even host an astrobiology conference, which they've done a couple of them now. And they're showing that adaptability already. And Lord knows that politics, whenever something becomes big, they're quick to jump on adapting these masses
well, adaptation, that's what humanity does better than anything, Alejandro. We adapt to things.
Right.
You can throw some pretty phenomenal things at us, and we tend to absorb and integrate. One of the things that you've commented on about the book, which I do think is sets it somewhat apart, is that we've tried to at least touch on almost everything that could potentially be changed, from popular culture to music to television to comic books. We talk about aviation law. We talk about what will happen to the price of oil. We talk about whether they'll close the stock market. We talk about whether there'll be truth commissions and amnesty and how the government will deal with it. What will the media do? And so in addition to the usual suspects that you would think about in a disclosure scenario of religion, maybe, and science, we do talk about how will it affect the United Nations. People talk about exopolitics. Well, we kind of take that to a whole new level, we think, in terms of just trying to analyze just how, again, revolutionary this is going to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like your book is like stepping into the TARDIS, because I don't know how you guys fit so many topics and so many angles to all of these various topics in 340 odd pages.
We did it by being maniacal in our obsession, which is, I think, the only way Rich Dolan and I know how to work. We just you sort of fall in the rabbit hole for a while, and you thrash around, but the main answer to what you're talking about is that once you set your mind on the goal of we're going to talk about how something as transformative as disclosure could affect society, not just American society, but global society, and how it will change the way we live, that's a really complicated, complex, and phenomenally interesting topic. And so one of the things we had to decide early on was, were we willing to stick our necks out? Not to say that we're right, because people, again, honest people will disagree about some of our conclusions, of course, but were we willing to stick our necks out and possibly be ridiculed for taking a stand that maybe somebody didn't agree with, or to discuss something that other people have thought might not be worthy of this book? We just really went for it. We just said, if you're going to call something AD after disclosure, you can't be a sissy about it. You got to go. You got to go all the way, and so we did. Yeah,
getting the conversation rolling is what the big deal is. That's I think the biggest thing, a huge accomplishment this does. And maybe that's number one, secondary to just all of the intelligent speculation that goes on. One area which someone asked about, and I want to get in before we run out of time, is this is a real sticky point, when it comes to disclosure. Someone is asking about abductees and contactees and how that plays into disclosure.
Well, again, I guess the answer to a lot of these things is it depends.
Right.
There are people that currently have if not the full story, a fuller story than a lot of us do, because a lot of what we know has been colored by various ways of reporting, by disinformation, by all kinds of things. So when you talk about abductees and so forth, what the answer is, well, what do some of those people in the know that we don't right now? That will certainly change how disclosure will be viewed. Mm-hmm. But in general, certainly to the extent that we go out of our way to analyze it in so many different ways. For example, there are currently far more people that claim to have served in Vietnam right now than actually did. So we also think that by taking real-world examples, post-disclosure, there'll be probably more people claiming to have been abducted than actually were. So there's that. There's also the fact that the people who legitimately have been abducted will find at least that they can now speak more openly, and their own mental health may improve as a consequence. They'll also probably end up on more than a few television shows discussing what they've gone through. And people like Whitley Strieber, who have had to put up with who've been in a more public role and have had to put up with the painful ridicule of being on South Park and ridiculed in the way that he has. Well, he'll get some of that respect back.
Right.
So it's more than I can answer in a couple of minutes here, but it is a fascinating
You don't
topic,
have a couple of minutes.
And it's going to change everything.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know there's so much to talk about. We'll definitely have you on again sooner than a year that it's been.
I appreciate it.
I just love our conversations. This is a lot of fun, and I think this gives the listeners a good example of why they need to read this book and how this book is really going to get their minds moving. It might make them happy sometimes. It might make them angry sometimes. But I think it's really going to stimulate the next level that we all need to move to in this conversation.
I appreciate that. I want to leave you with one thought. We're trying to start this discussion and this debate. That's why we set up afterdisclosure.com, so that people can start debating these issues now.
Great. Afterdisclosure.com. That's where you'll be able to get your book as well in
Yes.
just a few weeks.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello to everybody.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show. What an awesome show. That was a lot of fun. We also have next week George Filer coming on, and this is going to be exciting. He's a retired Air Force intelligence officer. A lot of you get the Filer's files, UFO files that come up. He's going to be talking to us about his amazing UFO experiences, such as being on an aircraft tanker over the UK when he's asked to check out a UFO, and even more amazing, serving at Fort Dix as an Air Force intelligence officer and being asked to brief generals on an incident where supposedly aliens had come and landed on a runway and got out of their vehicle and were shot by some MPs, and he was told, can you go tell the generals about, the aliens that got shot at the end of the runway? And he's like, what? I'm not going to go tell these generals that they're aliens at the end of the runway. So this is going to be a great show. George Filer's a wonderful person, and as you know, we had some problems, technical difficulties. He was supposed to be on a few weeks ago, and that didn't work out. So we got him rescheduled. We'll make sure it works this time, so be sure to check us out. Thank you for listening to Open Minds Radio, your UFO news authority. Visit openminds.tv for more on what we're up to. Talk to you next week.